The San Antonio Spurs, without Kawhi Leonard, are currently third in the Western Conference, 14-7. They are an elite defensive team. They're just good enough offensively, and we have to assume once Kawhi Leonard is back from his quad injury, which is weirdly taking longer than it seems everybody thought it would, you have to assume that that offense is going to jump up because it's currently 15th in the league right now, and the Spurs are going to be pretty damn scary. The question is, how scary? Well, if we look at just a season ago, first off, to remember where we're starting from here, they were beating up the Warriors in Game 1 before Kawhi Leonard got injured. And this came off of them just figuring out how to defeat the high-powered offense of the Houston Rockets, which consisted of big men backing up on the pick and roll, not helping out on shooters, keeping their hands down to not foul James Harden, and daring the Rockets to shoot a whole bunch of pull-up two-pointers that they didn't want to shoot. And they did this with the personnel of LaMarcus Aldridge, Pau Gasol, two big guys who are not known for their defense. So you, of course, have to attribute a lot of that to Greg Popovich. And who knows where they would have gone if Kawhi didn't get hurt against Golden State. I mean, my pick would be they would have probably lost to the Warriors in 6 games, but, I mean, who the hell do I know? Maybe they would have beaten Golden State, you know? So now, let's look at what's going well for them this season. I mean, defensively, them being 4th in the league, we really shouldn't be shocked at this point. And a lot of the strategies are still pretty similar. Whenever a team does a pick and roll with Pau Gasol, they have Gasol back up. They have the defender of the ball handler. If they were unable to get over the screen, they will not so much try to catch up to the player with the ball, but more so try to trap them towards the baseline, which gives Gasol a little bit of help. And then they'll have the other big guy, which sometimes it's LaMarcus Aldridge, and actually a lot of the time Aldridge and Gasol play together. And they'll have that guy just kind of load up the paint as well. So the paint is kind of a no-fly zone when San Antonio has their two big guys who are usually not very good defenders, but Popovich finds just a really good way of making it work with those two. But what might be the craziest thing is while they're able to do that, they're still 3rd in the NBA in terms of opponent three-pointers attempted that they've allowed, in that they're the 3rd lowest in that category. And they're also 2nd to the bottom in terms of opponent three-point makes. In other words, if I said that really confusing, like, they give up the 2nd least amount of threes to everyone in the league. They only give up 9 threes a game. So they're able to clog up the paint in the middle while also running you off the three-point line. And I think a lot of that is to do with Danny Green being an excellent defensive player, and then Patty Mills, Tony Parker, who's just now back, DeJounte Murray, Manu Ginobili, Kyle Anderson, Brandon Paul, a whole bunch of guys who are just good enough defensively, you know. Give credit to Rudy Gay. He's fit into the Spurs system really well. And they're also doing all of this without fouling. They're the best in the league in terms of least amount of fouls committed per game at 17.5. And number 1 in the league is around 24. So I mean, it's the Spurs on defense. We all know this. Now, let's talk about the offense, which is 15th in the league. So they're definitely not striving, but they've survived without Kawhi Leonard. First and foremost, big ups to LaMarcus Aldridge. 23 points a game, looking a lot like the Trailblazer version of LaMarcus Aldridge. And the thing with LA is, depending on the big man that's matched up with him, he has some sort of a counter. If it's more of a Zaza Pachulia type of a center who's strong and can defend the low post well, you can take him to the pick and pop, the pick and roll, or you could just space the floor and force Zaza to step out of his comfort zone. And I'm not using the Warriors as a direct example. Zaza was just the first center that came to my head here. But then you force the other team to kind of like make a tough decision about, should we move a more perimeter-oriented guy to LaMarcus because he's out on the perimeter so much? And then if you do that, guess what? LaMarcus can take him into the low post, and he can hit him with the hook shot, or of course the signature turnaround jumper. And they're going to him quite a lot. He's currently second in the league in post-ups per game at 12.5 possessions a game, where he has got his back to the basket. And he's also in the top 10 in terms of rolls to the basket per game off of pick and rolls. So basically, dude's being used a lot. And he is showing up for the Spurs. So if we think about Kawhi Leonard being back and how this LaMarcus Aldridge could fit into what Kawhi's got going on, I mean, we have to assume LaMarcus will just be shooting the ball less, of course. But what I'd be interested in is if you ran with Kawhi at power forward and then LaMarcus at center, because I think that would make the other team really have to question themselves, because if you have Aldridge out up top, because he's actually been a decent three-point shooter, and even if he's not at the three-point line, he can still kill you on long twos. You might have to put someone smaller on him, or you could put a big guy in there, because you could hope that like the big might have a chance against Aldridge, or you would just want to make it to where Aldridge can't post up on you. But the thing there is, if you have one big man in the game, he has to defend Aldridge, because there's no way he can defend Kawhi Leonard. And so then it comes back to, well, Aldridge could kill you from outside. And then it's, well, who do we put on Aldridge? Well, given that Kawhi's at the 4, we don't have a lot of options here. So basically, the Spurs have themselves quite a luxury with LaMarcus Aldridge going off, is what I'm getting at here. And what I think could be an interesting lineup towards the postseason could be something to the effect of like Tony Parker or Patty Mills at point guard, Danny Green, Rudy Gay, Kyle Anderson, Manu, wherever you want to put in at the 3, and then Kawhi and Aldridge up front. That could create a lot of problems for opposing teams. Now, as far as how the rest of the offense is going, I mean, there's always a spaced floor with San Antonio. Gasol as well as Aldridge, while they're not knockdown three-point shooters, they're both pretty decent from the corners, and they're both good mid-range shooters, so you still have to care about them. And then the play just never dies with San Antonio. So even if the initial action doesn't work, and by the way, San Antonio doesn't always run like super complex offense. A lot of the time it's like simple pick and rolls that everybody else is running. But the big difference here, like I mentioned, is that there's always like a purpose behind it. It seems like with some teams it's like, well, crap, we don't know what to do, let's call a pick and roll. Whereas with San Antonio, there's more of a purpose. And I think that purpose comes from like where everyone's placed on the floor. So it'll be like just the spacing. The spacing is always so good to where the driving lane combined with the passing lane to a potential open shooter is always just so precise with them, instead of, I'll just use OKC as an example, which, by the way, their offense looked good tonight against Minnesota. I just want to say that. But, OKC, there might be 10 seconds left, and we go, all right, Westbrook, go run a screen with Steven Adams real quick, and we'll figure it out. Whereas the Spurs already know what's going to happen on the pick and roll. And the guys running that are, of course, Tony Parker, who's looking faster by the day, Patty Mills, who's got the pull-up mid-range going on, Rudy Gay's been doing it a little bit, Manu's been doing it a little bit, DeJounte Murray's been doing it a little bit. It's all just enough to get by offensively until your top 5 player in Kawhi Leonard comes back. So based on everything I've seen so far out of San Antonio, would I honestly pick them over the Houston Rockets, who have looked fantastic with Chris Paul and James Harden together? Honestly, yes. I would pick San Antonio over Houston because I'm seeing what the Spurs are right now, and then I put Kawhi Leonard into that equation. So yeah, definitely. And as far as against the Warriors, I mean, ultimately, I'm going to pick Golden State. But, I mean, San Antonio, just where they look now, you add him into that, they honestly project to be a better team, in my opinion. And I think they were already good enough to push the Warriors to Game 6 anyway. And then you combine that with Andre Iguodala being a little slower. Draymond has been a little worse defensively. I mean, Golden State as a whole has just been a little worse this season, which I think is kind of human nature, because when you've been the best team in the league for, what is it now, 3-4 years, you're going to take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit. But at the same time, they might be able to just ramp it up in the postseason and it won't matter. But Spurs are good, man. They're very good. And, I mean, even without Kawhi Leonard, they're on pace to win like 50-something games. So, yeah, I think once Kawhi comes back, I think these guys are definitely the second best team in the West. All credit to the Houston Rockets, but, I mean, it's the Spurs, man.